The butterfly effect is the phenomenon whereby a minute localized change in a complex system can have large effects elsewhere. In other words, the flapping of your wings can actually have an effect on people here and really all around the world. Good buddy of mine, Cliff Sims, who's now the special assistant to President Donald Trump, used to live here in Birmingham, and he shared this story with me. The story about a guy named Norman Borlaug. Borlaug is credited with saving over 2 billion people through an arid climate drought that was very serious back in the middle of the 20th century. He actually won the Pulitzer Prize for his work on this. But when you look back at Borlaug's track record, he was actually mentored and developed by the former Vice President of the United States, a guy named Henry Wallace, who had a plant down in Mexico and taught Borlaug how to do many of the things he did when he saved those 2 billion people. If you look back at Wallace, though, he was actually mentored on agriculture as well. He was mentored by a guy named George Washington Carver. Washington Carver was an 18-year-old student at Iowa State, and yeah, he's known for what he did with the peanut, but he also was an agricultural genius, and he mentored a young Henry Wallace who ended up becoming vice president. But when you look back at George Washington Carver's track record, it gets real interesting, because he was actually in a very, very, very tough area of Missouri where Quantrill's raiders raided it, taking every African slave they could find. But there was a guy named Moses Carver who spoke up and said, "I want that baby boy to stay safe with me." And he traded a horse to Quantrill's raiders to keep what would become the little boy who grew into George Washington Carver. You see, Moses traded his horse and mentored George Washington Carver and raised him up to go to Iowa State, where he mentored Henry Wallace, who became vice president and mentored Norman Borlaug, who's credited with saving 2 billion people and won a Pulitzer Prize. The things we do to flap our wings, we may see and we may not. But what we need to know is we can flap them for good or flap them for bad. So the question is, how are you going to flap your wings today and throughout the rest of your life to make an impact that leaves a legacy?